Issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to discussion, but there is generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do it during the regular scheduled meetings. And tonight, I'm going to open the meeting up, and we're going to have a conversation about short-term rentals. And
yeah, I think tonight is just a follow-up from the last commission meeting. We had a couple of work sessions and discussions, and at the last meeting, we did have on the agenda a draft resolution for consideration, and I think there was some discussion that maybe wasn't quite where it needed to be. So, thought maybe if we schedule another work session tonight, we might get to that point. So, I think it's kind of up to you guys. Commissioner Sullivan, you said last meeting, we had some questions and concerns. Commissioner Sullivan set out some questions ahead of time.
And may I start?
please.
Okay. So Heather, do you know what I'm talking about with the definition of term?
Yep, no problem, we can add that.
And then the forms, I think when we're ready to roll out with the ordinance, that it would be nice to have all of these ready. And then that brings me up to when I was looking at this, it would be great to have someplace on our website, digital access to this stuff. So like right now, like I work in a hotel, obviously I keep saying that, but if we can, you can go online and see if my hotel has passed that health inspection and a motel inspection. And so it's like, it seems like it would be a couple things with the digital database. One, to move our records from paper to digital, and two, it's more transparency, like, oh, is my neighbor permitted for renting that? I see if they're permitted online. And so that's what I don't know the details of how to do that, but I think it would be very doable, and I would like to see, and I don't know if it needs to be in the ordinance.
Yeah, that shouldn't be in the ordinance, that's a management issue, and, yeah, and that would be a cost factor for CAM to evaluate and get back to you and prioritize.
So, I mean, I would like to do that. The other thing is, I talked to Director Mike McNichol, and he said, and I know that there's controversy in the Gearhart situation, but he said that while there was a lot of questions about updating the septic, and I don't know how to say that, so the septic and sewage system, I mean, it's going to be different for the county because we're not a city, but he said within a year they've done an amazing job of getting these septic systems inspected, and so I think this short-term ordinance is actually a great opportunity for us to not only move towards digitizing our information on this, but also of looking at the septic systems that are out there. Because I know at previous meetings he's talked about that. Because when septic systems go wrong, you know, that affects all of us with the water supply and whatnot.
Can I
Sure.
interject as we go along?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I am not supportive of singling out the short-term rentals. In Gearhart, unfortunately, most of the houses were on cesspools for a very long time. And now that AEQ is more active, and when houses sell, they are paying attention to this. That's a good thing, but I don't really support this idea. While the effect may be this, that because people have short-term rentals, they're upgrading their systems. I don't support forcing people into that, depending, because like you point out, not all situations are the same.
Right, that's right.
And it's also not a hotel industry. The average Airbnb house that is rented in Seaside is twice a month. The average overall in Cannon Beach is 30 times a year. So if we put all of the short-term rentals into one restrictions onerous on everyone. I cannot support
Oh, I understand that.
that. I don't want to compare it to the hotel industry.
Well, no, I don't think we should, all I'm just saying is that's my experience in my work life, is with the health department. So that's why I bring that up. But clearly, they're two different things. But I do think that, that there's gonna be a wide range of how many people, in what way they use short-term rentals. There's gonna be a wide range. But I think, and I'm not interested in making it so onerous that they don't get themselves involved. But at the same time, you know, we have to pay attention to the problem things. That's what we're trying to protect ourselves from.
Yeah, a couple of comments, and I think it's a good discussion. In terms of the actual standards that septic systems, you know, have to meet, this inspection, those standards are the same, same standards. And actually, my group, can't do all the inspections here, but we do that for sure. And we also have, we get some funding, not a lot, but we get some funding from the state. So we are out on a regular basis, you know, inspect septics. But I think to the issue of, if there's a small problem, you know, we try to work with somebody, you know.
Sure,
to
yeah.
correct it. If it's a really egregious issue, I mean, we actually can't shut people down for that. You know, we don't run into those very often. There's been one since I've been here, we just said, no, they're just calling it wrong. You can't do it.
Right.
So, you know, I think the standards really are going to be something that
Well, what I hear you saying, Cam, is that, that we already are looking at septic and sewage systems for long-term and short-term and everyone, because that's just public health.
Yeah, I mean, just a little bit back, this just happened, or years before that. The state used to do that, and then they put that on the counties.
Okay.
They gave us a little bit, not as much as we should get, but, so we do have an obligation to do that, and we have
Absolutely.
2 staff who pretty much are full-time doing that, doing that, restaurant inspections. That's what we're doing. So,
And just in terms of usage, I mean, I know that there are averages, but I also know what I see in my neighborhood. And there's one house, regularly 5 cars full of people there. And it's not a few times a year. It's multiple times every week or every month during the season in a couple of different houses. And one's right on the beach, and I've been walking on it, and sometimes I've smelled stuff and talked to the neighborhood water district person, and they've intervened, so I didn't know I could call the county and have that checked. And I appreciate what you say, that we don't want to be unduly restrictive. On the other hand, this is a growing trend in my experience in my neighborhood, because I've tracked it. And so
Does Arch Cape have your own?
She's not in.
I'm not
She's in
Arch Cape.
Falmouth.
I have an Arch Cape address, but I live south of the tunnel, and my neighborhood exempted itself from the Arch Cape restrictions. So anytime there's a problem, what we heard was, sorry, we can't help you. Only Arch Cape regulates that. Every place else in the county is unrestricted. So there was nothing that could be done, because I was on the phone, especially, can I just insert one thing?
Sure, absolutely.
If we had a form for neighbors to report issues and written complaints, I'd like to see that on the website, because 4th of July weekend, when the ordinance has been exploding so loud, it shook the windows in my house, I would have filled out a
The
form.
what?
Bottle rockets,
Oh,
bottle rockets. It was
Drought,
ordinance.
they shouldn't have been shooting.
I'm telling you, the Eagles used to be there, and then they left, but whose enforcement issue is it? And at least if there's a way to track when there's an issue, because maybe there won't be. Maybe there won't be issues, because somebody put up signs around the neighborhood that said no illegal fireworks, because they were setting off, and that seemed to make a difference this year. But there's still people doing things that are illegal often, and how do we make room to take that into account without being unduly restrictive as to people's property rights, because we do have to have a balance, I think.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I have problems with, so I can only speak from my experience in Deerheart. Most of the houses there are part-time occupants, 60%. And it's my experience, if you're talking about fireworks, which that's really not what we're addressing, but it's the people who own their house that come down and do those things. It's not the short-term renters. Now, maybe they do too, but I've seen this over and over again, people who own their houses. And this is why I have trouble making it more restrictive for short-term rentals than the people who own vacation homes and don't rent them out. It's somewhat similar. I have a real problem with it being there.
But with the, getting back to the septic, Cam, what you're saying is that the standards are the same for everybody in the county?
All throughout the state.
Throughout the state. So it's just that we are now mandated to do the research or do the inspections on the county level, at the state level. So that's just part of the ordinance because it's part of everybody's ordinance, right? It's part of
The
everybody's
difference
situation.
here, and I was kind of trying to draw an area between extremes, we are requiring that before they get a license, they come in and show us that their system has been approved by an approved septic professional, which would be someone with a license to do that, unless current DEQ records, which means that they've filled out forms recently, show that their capacity is good. Or they can even have a holding tank as long as they have a contract with a signed contract with a pumping company. And so the difference between our ordinance and Gearhart's ordinance is that in Gearhart, they charge a fee and have the county sanitarian do the inspections.
What's the difference between a sanitarian and just our staff?
Same thing. They have, and, yeah.
Oh, is that part of the?
And our ordinance just says you can have a
license.
septic tank expert, which can be Joe's Septic Tank Service if they have the right certifications.
And that's what I support.
So there's a difference between that and paying a fee to the county to have them do the inspections. I think Gearhart has a much more frequent inspection. Ours would be every 5 years. I think,
Possibly.
I can't remember what theirs is,
Some
possibly,
interval.
or something. So that would be different. Gearhart also,
Are there costs incurred in inspecting these septics?
I think the county one, to have our county guys do it was $100 or $200, I can't remember. And I would suspect that Joe's Septic Service would be happy to undercut that.
Well,
you know.
I would, I don't think $200 for inspection every few years is
But
onerous.
that's just that, the
Right.
other things that, we're talking about, we've done some looking at if all of these things are approved, what would it cost us to run these various levels of inspection? You're probably looking somewhere in the $600 to $900 range, which again, doesn't sound like a lot of money, but I think that's too much to estimate to pay every year. Once every 5 years may not enough, but I think you suggested 3 years. I don't think we want to do it any more frequently than that.
Well, I hadn't seen the $900 figure anywhere in the ordinance, so.
No, it doesn't, fees are always set by resolution. You don't put them in the ordinance, because 20 years from now, you don't want to be charging $900.
Also, in Gearhart, they can't keep, there was only 84 permits, and they still can't get to all of them. So, we're talking about big delay. You're suggesting we hire staff so that we can do more, that's really costly.
Well, we talked about it at the first work,
Fees could support that.
Right.
You know, we do have staff in the county that are supporting.
Right, right.
So, you know, it depends on how many, but, you know. yeah.
I mean, part of that was the first work session, was of that spectacular, 3-story fire on the county, and we talked about, you know, how did this occur? And I think there is a need for more inspectors. I mean, I personally, am hesitant to pass an ordinance that doesn't get enforced. What's the point of it?
Well, but I would also keep in mind, and this is just the way things happen, they didn't pull it.
Exactly.
We wouldn't have known to inspect it if we didn't know it was there.
Well,
And actually, it first came to my attention when one of our staff members showed me pictures of the fire. They were like, you know, okay, what's the deal with that? And we went to see where the permits, and we realized, okay, they never pulled the permit, so there never was an inspection.
so we missed the bullet on that one.
So that's
But
a
I
big
mean, point on
thing.
something like that is if somebody's building something new, they have to, they communicate the permits, you know, like they're supposed to, then they would have an inspection.
But it's the same thing. If we knowingly give a wink and a nod to somebody who's doing it short-term rental and it burns down and kills a family, that's a problem too. Which is, you know, the whole point of this is to get some safety regulations in place.
Yeah, I think, part of it just, you know, for everybody to keep in mind, you know, we talked about like the database and some of the forms and stuff like that. So, you know, what generally would happen with a resolution like this is, you know, you may approve this, it may not take effect until, you know, July 1 or something.
Mhm.
And that's where we take the time and, you know, let's get all the forms in place, let's do all the stuff that we need to do. So even if you, there's a time on the agenda tonight, but if you approve it tonight, you know, we're going to back probably for 3 or 4 months. You also want to give people time to adjust it.
Right.
So you know, it's not something they know they need to do. And we have to have time to plan for how we implement it as well. So.
And, you know, maybe, I mean, I recognize that there is a difference between someone who's living in a home and rents their basement apartment out twice a year. That's different than an outside, company coming in and buying houses for investments to do short-term rentals on a regular basis. And that is happening. I don't think we can bury our head in the sand and say that's not happening. That's happening.
Well, this
And-
is
and-
another thing. We haven't done this countywide study, and I know that people seem to be very positive that the reason that we have a shortage of housing is because of the short-term rentals. We don't really know. We don't have any facts yet.
Well, I know that, you know, I've talked to people that, I mean, that video that I referenced at the last meeting or whenever the meeting was, on the Tillamook housing study. I mean, one of the first things he says in there is you are not going to prevent short-term rentals, and you cannot count on short-term rentals to take care of your workforce housing issue. Because, you know, the Pandora's box is open, and it's not gonna, you're not going to shut it. And so, you know, I think it's a change for our area. We are a destination location now. And the culture is changing. And what used to be people having second homes and having Aunt Lou come over once a year, that's changing. And we need to try to be out in front of it as best as we can, you know?
The internet's been a game changer.
Absolutely.
It's the World Wide Web, and people do come from all over the world. And so, okay, how do we respond to that in a way that protects livability, doesn't unduly compromise property rights, and still maintains public safety? Because it's all of it. It has to be all of it. And where do you, it's a slippery slope, because I saw that you said, well, once or twice a year with every single day or every single weekend. Well, you know, how do we want a yes-no thing? Do we want a gradient? I mean, I like your idea that we look at the housing study, but I don't know how long that puts it out. And I don't know if something happens in the meantime, what our culpability is, what our legal exposure to risk is, or just, you know, just kind of a moral thing about should we have acted and didn't. So just trying to consider all of those
Well,
things.
I'm not against having, you know, these regulations, some of them.
Mhm.
What I am pushing against is making them so restrictive. And Gerhard, I think, made some very draconian decisions there. And I'm not supportive of that. I don't really have a dog in the fight, but I have talked to people who have problems because of this. And I think the units can also be modified. I mean, I think everyone is scared. Okay, the internet's out there, so we've got to get ahead of it. Well, we can't even anticipate what all of those problems will be, and these things can be modified as we go.
Yeah.
If we find that, you know, oh my goodness, look what these people are doing, it's this and that, then we can modify it.
See, I'm already hearing those stories.
Yeah.
I'm already hearing those stories.
Me too.
But you-
People are very frustrated about what's going on in their neighborhood. And I think we need, and I hear what you're saying, and I expect that things will be modified. But we also, part of this, and we're just doing a safety issue here. But there's also questions of land use. I mean, when does a neighborhood become a commercial neighborhood? I mean, that's ahead of us. We don't necessarily have to deal with it on this particular ordinance, but that's the reality of what's happening to our communities.
Well,
And now we as a county, we may not deal with that as much as the cities have to.
yeah.
We have to keep that in mind too.
And if, you know, there are ways to probably deal with, if you're worried about, you know, a big company coming in and buying up, you know, 5 houses or 10 houses and using it that way. I think there's something that can be dealt with. I'm not sure this is the time to do that. But I think there are ways to restrict that. But I don't.
That's a trend we should keep our eye on.
Mhm.
I mean, at some point, you know, you really want to be in a position to tell a private company that they can't buy a private piece of property from a private property owner who's going to sell it.
Right.
I agree with,
That sounds pretty tough.
Right, that's
I
right.
agree with Sarah in the conversations I've had. I think we need to get a good foundational ordinance, and then we can always build on it in the future. You know, look at what's going on in Gerhard. It's been a lot of acrimony down there. People are very upset. It's come to a vote. I'm interested to see what happens with this vote in Gerhard before we make our move. That's definitely, because that's a couple weeks out. And I think that while I agree with a good look at the housing study, I don't think that, I'm curious, but like, the housing study is gonna go on for months.
Yes.
And that could be a little
Right.
outside of our timeline here.
And I wasn't
We're having
suggesting
supposed to be
that
in this
we.
year, maybe October next week, I think it is, but it's coming.
So it sounds like we're gonna probably move on this decision before we have the housing study. Which I would like to have the housing study before we do this, but I think this brings me back to why, and what's going on in Gerhard, well, we really need to just get a kind of a good foundation that is not too strong, and then we can build on in the future. That's pretty much where I'm at on this.
Yeah, I think it's important too, and it's important, you know, we know that there are wrestling with this issue, but again, in a different way, I think there are more differences in ordinance and there are similarities to our ordinance. There are a few similarities, but not that many.
Right.
You know, ours is much less what I would call intrusive or restrictive, than Gerhard, and I think that's not a bad way to start with public policy. We can have discussed it months ago, but we feel that there's need to do that, but I don't think we can go as far as the other.
But I guess I'm not understanding exactly, with the septic system, what's the problem with knowing that the septic systems are working? I don't understand what the problem with that is.
Well, we will.
But I mean, but you brought that up, Sarah, that's with the cesspools, is that the standard, modern standard to have a cesspool?
No, that's not legal.
No, I
So-
wasn't, I'm sorry if that's the way that came across.
Yeah, I
No.
didn't understand that,
What I'm saying is, so what Mike was saying, that it's so great that Gerhard is doing this because now we're getting, you know, these systems upgraded.
Mhm.
I don't know that in the county that there are as many people in cesspools as there have been in Gerhard. It's been known for a long time that that's been the case because most of those houses are not ever used. And so now that, and really, you know what the average is in Gerhart for days that they're used for short-term rentals is approximately 90.
Mhm.
A year.
And I've had a constituent complaining about the house next door that has a holding tank, and it regularly is exceeded. There's parking, I mean, we don't look at other kinds of neighborhood livability issues yet. So if we're gonna tighten, there are a lot of things to look at, because how do all those people, how do they get in there and stay in there, and they wanna drive over other people's land to get to pump it because they can't go through the whole weekend without needing to pump the holding tank. I mean, there really are issues, and she's been working on this for years to great frustration. We're trying to work through the county, trying to work through DEQ, having no success because it just kind of falls through the cracks. And so I'm interested in supporting people who are trying to protect some neighborhood livability for septic issues and for other kinds of issues.
And I talked to somebody who was talking about, you know, the numbers being exceeded in their house. They call, they come out, they move the RV 2 inches, and that's counted as good, and they're running hoses into the house. You know, I mean, I think it's prudent that we look at this. I mean, I just, Heather, do you see any issues with the septic, what we have in the ordinance?
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, I think you'd mentioned you talked to Mike McNichols, and
I mean, it's
he
unfortunate,
liked
Mike,
the way Gerhart
you have to
works.
talk to Mike. I mean, I don't
But
want to speak for him.
but the difference is just how I had written it was, you know, that you didn't have to have the county do it. You could have a licensed septic guy approve it, but you still have to come in with a certificate.
Right.
But if you can get your next door neighbor who's got a license to do it, then great. You don't have to pay the county 200 or whatever they're.
As
we're
long as
charging.
they're a licensed professional.
Yeah, they've got to have a certificate.
don't want mine.
And DEQ is the one that licenses them.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
Good.
I don't know why you thought he did, but that's all right.
But then we're back to enforcement, because if there are issues, I mean, I hope when we do the fee setting that we're looking at the cost of having a form on the web, so that, I think that's really what people are gonna look for in terms of instant enforcement 24/7, is the capacity to file a report. And if we make that possible, I think that's gonna help with enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably most of the time when we do find out about enforcement issues, or some problems, we simply don't have to just write it down.
Right.
That's something you don't have to do.
Right, and of course not, and we don't want to live in a society like that. But this, the person that was talking to me about the house in Seaside that she was having issues with, you know, I think there's people concerned about blowback if they complain about their neighbors. And so how do we make the system so that we can get the information and the people don't get penalized for revealing this information?
Well, I mean, we do that now, but what often happens, and this happens across a variety of neighborhood complaints that we get, is usually when someone from the county shows up, they already know. You know, it's a neighbor that they've had a dispute with, someone called about it before. I mean, we don't dare to call, we just say, we got a complaint, you know, we're coming out the road, they're going, yeah, exactly. So, these oftentimes are actually long-time neighbor disputes. You know, they know each other, they disagree about a variety of things for years.
I mean, if it's a frivolous complaint, but if it's a meaningful complaint, that helps us out.
It helps us a lot, but you know, my point is, people can't find out who complained to us. They can phone records and most they could, but we don't propose that.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't think you did, but I,
It's just, they usually know, you know,
Yeah.
they usually know, it's either this neighbor or that neighbor, you know, what I'm calling. So, and, you know, I also think it's important, that, you know, I think just generally people understand, you know, enforcement is not quite as easy as when we all talk about enforcement. It's actually pretty complicated. We don't have absolute authority to just go in and do what we want. And if people push back, there's process
You know, I thought, where you finished? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So I see the changes in the red line. Everything here looks good to me. Was there any other, do you think any of all have concerns about any of the changes in the red line?
I just
The red line,
want,
what do you mean by red line?
Changes are shown in red line, and they are as follows. These are the changes that Cam has made to the ordinance since the last work session. Heather?
I don't,
Yes.
I would just
Based on our discussions.
point out one thing, I guess, to think about, and that's probably 90%, maybe more, I don't know, of the people who do short-term rentals, when they apply for a certificate, and they suddenly realize that, oh, we've just never bothered to put cover, I mean, this, and I'm talking from personal experience here. Oh, I guess most people like covers over their electrical outlets. We probably better do that before we rent the house, which was a brilliant thought that a friend of mine had. So a lot of things that make the short-term rentals unsafe right now are just kind of based, you know, we probably should have a fire extinguisher in the kitchen. It's kind of a good idea, you know, that people just, some of it's just they don't think about it.
It's some common sense stuff.
And if you have it in here when they apply for it, they'll do it.
Right.
And then we've got it. So
exactly.
that's just, you know, one thing, and yeah, you're gonna have problems with the 5% or whatever it is that don't do what they're supposed to, and, you know, but the vast majority of people, this will get them into having a safe place if they don't already. And a lot of people, you don't think about your house till you go to rent it out, and you may not get it into the best condition before that.
I would like to have inspections. I mean, I would like, personally like to have them every year, but I would be okay with every 3 years. I think 3 years is better than 5 years.
I agree with that.
I'm at 5 years. I think that's plenty.
Well, and then internally, we were trying to.
The what?
35 years is sort of, we came down internally when we had the discussion, that, you know, probably more than that, you're really costing people money when you don't spend. So I
Maybe.
think anything in the 35 years, so that's,
What's it written at now?
it's really fun.
I wrote it at 5.
5 is fine with me.
I'm fine with
I
5.
think that we have to be careful not to put more regulations on short-term rentals than, say, a long-term rental. I'm all for the safety. I think it's very important. I think it's an exceptional idea to list it out in the application, because I think that most people just don't think about it. They just don't realize it. And if it's there, like you said, you're always going to have people, I don't know how much the percentage, but there's always going to be people that aren't going to comply. They just aren't going to.
Right.
But that's with
And they
everything.
won't even apply in the first place.
With everything.
You
So
know.
maybe if you do 5 years, at least now we perhaps will also have the manpower to be able to do it. If we say 3 years or 1 year, there's no way we're gonna have the manpower to get out there and do it.
I think
just
we,
don't think it's possible. I mean, we're so behind with inspections and count, it's just,
well, I think that that's an
Happen.
issue that we should look at in the budget. I mean, we allocated $50,000 for a housing study. That's a nice salary for someone for a year, because it was only a one-time thing. But I think that we should look at do we need more inspectors? I mean, I know that Heather talked about, and this is a different thing, but assessors. Is it real short, and I know they're working on that, but
But that.
that's a different thing, I know, but,
She's talking about private, home buyers.
Yeah.
okay.
There's a shortage of appraisers, so if you're
Right.
trying to buy a home, you have to get your home appraised. There aren't any
Yep.
appraisers,
Yep.
so I went through this when I bought a home, I waited like forever just to get my home appraised.
I know it's tough. There's a lot of things to do to jail too.
And that's outside the county.
So I think that's more what she's talking about there, but we do this, every year we go through the budget, we go through what our staffing needs are, and, the, community development department, the budget request we got from that department was for 1 new full-time position this year, that's what I got.
So we have increased that, so then we'll see this year how it works, because if
Right.
this continues and we have more complaints that we're able to handle, then we would have to look ahead to
But one
that.
of the things that, you know, at least I always like to guard against is
Right.
You can ramp up later, but if you take on too
Yep.
much expense at the beginning, you dig yourself a hole, and you have to deal with it.
Right.
This is kind of digressing, however, it's a little journey. So when Gerhard first started looking at the short-term rental problem, what the city manager said is, there haven't been any complaints. None.
Hmm.
By the end of the year, when people were on the council and the people who want tight regulations and very restrictive regulations, the end of the year at the meeting, the city manager said, well, there haven't been complaints, but we believe what's happening is people just aren't coming forward. So what do you do with that? So they went ahead and they made this very restrictive ordinance because they perceive that there are so many problems and yet no complaints. So that, I don't want to do that here.
Do you feel like there's a lot of restrictions in this one what, like, could you share with us what you think is
No,
too
I
restrictive?
feel like you, and maybe Commissioner Thompson wanted to be way restrictive, and I would rather wait until the problem arises, but cover ourselves, make sure that.
These are what my concerns are. I don't think that I'm asking for this to be more restrictive. These are what my concerns are. My concerns are about the septic system. I personally would like to have it every 3 years. You know, that's my preference. I've talked about my concern about enforcement. I would like to see us go into the 21st century and get a digital database for this information. And so these are my concerns at the moment. So I'm not assuming that nor did I ever say that I wanted to upturn this and make it onerous regulations. I'm just saying the way it's
A
written.
lot of the things in here would be part of that publication.
Yeah, so,
Great.
And really they shouldn't, they're for the manager and not for being in the policy
Yeah,
ordinance.
well, once we start to develop, the timeline is informed, like you guys know, this is what we have, keep that copy and everything. But again, this will be some period of time.
I mean, and I have done some editing in my background, and so language-wise, there are things that I kind of feel like I'd like to move this here
Oh,
and there.
well, go for it.
But, I mean, that's where I'm coming from. I'm just trying to look at fresh eyes and try to give the best perspective that I can
Well,
from
I
my own
appreciate
personal
that.
experience.
I appreciate this is good information, and it was, I think it's important to, talk about these issues, absolutely.
And I'd just like to say, sir, I'm not trying to make it more onerous, but what I am responding to is years and years and years of listening to neighbors complain at neighborhood meetings and in other kinds of conversations about not having an apparatus to make a complaint. And so they had complaints, but there was nothing to capture them. So let's see if we have an apparatus in place, then let's see what we have.
Okay, well, is there any final comments or questions for staff? I
Any
think-
changes, or do you need me to send you a red line to?
If you can send me a Word document rather than a PDF,
Yeah,
I can't
edit a
So
PDF,
it sounds
right.
like, it seems like we were going to want to bring this back after the Gerhard decision. Is that what we wanted?
It'll take about that long to get
Yeah, okay, so
everything
we'll
put
look at maybe
together.
bringing this back to the board for,
And just as a reminder, we also have to get a calendar change for November, December, typically over 1 month, this month, so it would be the November, December.
yeah, we'll figure that out here in a little bit when we figure out the November meeting. Fair enough, okay,
And figure you're gonna start implementing it July 1 next year,
I would think,
fiscal year? Okay,
and that coincides with
I'll add that in.
it coincides with the beginning of the tourist season too.
we can look at it in the context of the budget, this is time to do that. So,
I have one more question about this. A question about transferring it to when someone else buys that. under G, the short-term rental permit is transferable to a new owner so long as the new owner submits the short-term permit application, agrees in writing. So
Is that G, what? Section?
GH, or it's H, I guess it's H.
Section 9H?
So what that means is, Heather, is that if someone sells the property, the new person, what happens with that? Is it,
If they sell the well, this is envisioned, and you can have it any way you want, but how this is envisioned is that if they sell it, the new owner can continue under the old owner's permit. In other words, they don't have to apply for a new inspection for the remainder of that 5-year period if they sign a form, which hasn't been developed, that they agree to, you know, with the terms of the, in other words, if they sign the same kind of application as the owner did, basically it's, they don't have to have the inspection and they won't have to pay the fee at that time. They just have to agree to abide by it for the remainder of the term.
time period?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that if you had your home inspected and then put it on the market and there were still 4.5 years left in the inspection period, then it would, when the
Okay,
new buyers
that
came
makes
in,
sense.
they'd get to run it for 4.5 years if they agreed to do everything they were supposed to do under
And then there's
the application.
another thing in here about personal service or letter. I don't know if that's a complaint thing. Oh yeah, here, it's under compliance, revocation and appeals, D. Any, section 12, notice any conditions, suspensions established by an enforcement official will be delivered by personal service or certified mail to the address of the owner and the permit.
Personal service means you hand it to them. Certified mail means it's sent, you know, that they have to sign for it. So that you can have, yeah, so you've got somebody who can do an affidavit that it's been
So
received.
that's, if it's an out-of-state person or out-of-town,
It would probably be
person.
sent certified mail.
okay. Is there any way that we can, as we update our notification stuff, can people text in complaints, or, I mean, is there a
Well,
way
this
to
isn't-
look at that kind of stuff, or?
This isn't a complaint. This is the notice that the building official
Oh,
is
okay.
going to pull their permit, which is a property right, so they
Okay.
need the formal notice.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, for complaints, yeah.
Absolutely, we can set something like that up.
And break it down is easy.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you, and thank you.
All right, meeting's adjourned, thank you.